Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show of the Network Plus Study Group this month. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have got plenty of Q&A coming your way shortly in 10 minutes. Until then, you're welcome to join me as I make sure that all of these things are working properly on this side. This study group will take place in about 10 minutes. So if you fast forward, if you're watching this on the replay, if you fast forward, you'll be able to do that. Of course, you're not watching on the replay, you probably won't be able to fast forward. I'm not sure, but I'm almost certain you will not be able to. There is all Network Plus Q&A today. So that's our topic. The first hour will be Network Plus Q&A. The second hour will be open phone lines and taking questions from the chat room. If you are watching this on the YouTube and you are here live, you'll notice there's no chat there. The chat is over on my website, professormesser.com/live. professormesser.com/live. There'll be the live stream there. There'll be a chat underneath. You can pop the chat out and put it in another window if you want. Plenty of flexibility there. We've got all Network Plus today. I like Network Plus. That's really where I really got into IT, was networking. I was doing tons of Windows desktop and server stuff. Just tons of, really Novell server stuff, but tons of Windows workstation, automating, running across the network, doing a lot of really interesting things there. But then when I saw the network, then everything changed. Oh, let's have a look at our stats. Make sure that we are online, that you can see us and hear us and all of those things. There's folks. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining the stream. I see you there. I see you. We've got plenty to check on. Let's do some of those checks right now. What do we need to put up here? We need a presentation. Let's do a camera check. Let's do a camera check of me. Hi, it's me. This is camera 2. Camera 3 is what's in front of me, and camera 4 is the laptop that's to my right. So it looks like we got everything here that we wanted to have here, except you. We need you. So thank you for joining us. We'll get plenty of QA going in just a bit. We got about 8.5 minutes to go, and we'll get all of those things going. This is a lot of content in a short period of time. We'll go through quite a number of questions in this first hour. But of course, in the second hour, you can call in with whatever question you'd like. I don't know that I'll answer it, but you can ask any question you'd like. Usually in the second hour, it's questions about certifications, about career, but you're welcome to ask anything. It doesn't have to be that. The second hour is really just there for me. That's just something that I'm able to do. I always thought I would have a study group where I just turn on the camera and I talk. And we could certainly do that, but I don't know that it's quite as valuable without the Q&A at the beginning. So I kind of feel like it's nice to get some Q&A. It's nice to get some learning in very early on in the first hour. And then we can open up the phone lines. Maybe I just don't think anybody would watch if it was just me talking to the camera. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's a little truth there. Maybe some people are thinking, well, I think you might be understating. No, I'm completely understating that. That's one of those situations where let's actually do something constructive for an hour that we all can get something out of. Then we'll shift gears. I have at times considered maybe not doing I didn't put the chat on the website though. So let's put the chat on the website. That's one thing I have not done yet. Because I told you the chat was there, and there's no chat there. And you can't tell me that there's no chat there because there's no chat there. So I'll add the chat here in just a moment. We'll get all of this done, do not worry. I have to click a few things on my side, unhide the chat, and update. And in a moment, you will be able to refresh the screen and have a chat on the page. Do we make it before the updates went out? We did by just a few seconds. We got the update done before people receive their email messages. So now if you refresh professormesser.com/live, there'll be a chat there, which makes all the difference. I'm looking at the chat and thinking, well, people just aren't very interested in talking today. Sure they are. They're just not able to. Let's see if I can put this content. I put Security Plus. We're not even doing Security Plus today. So I'm going to remove that from the chat. Network Plus Study Group. I don't even know what date it is. Live. There we go. Cameroon is in the chat. See, I knew it would work. Something about turning it on. Have you turned it off and back on again? Is it plugged in? No. It's the most simple troubleshooting tasks that always seem to fix the problem. Is it plugged in? In my professional career, working with technical people who are the highest trained, the highest level technicians that you would find, highest level systems engineers in the industry, and we constantly forget to plug it in. We're troubleshooting a problem. We're in a conference room. We're doing a lab. We're setting it up, and it's not working. And somebody realizes, oh, we forgot to plug it in. So when we say for your first step in troubleshooting, is it plugged in? People seem to get offended when that's asked of them. But if it wasn't so common and so simple to check, we would not be asking. There's a method to our madness. Let's see if this will work. Did it? Yes. Very nice. Oh, welcome Miami, my old stomping grounds. Ann Arbor, Michigan is here. Orlando is here. Not Orlando, but Orlando, Florida. Orlando's the guy I know. Orlando, Florida's the place. Welcome to the chat. Now the chat's working. So now everyone's gotten their tweets and they've gotten their emails and all of that. Mexico is here. Houston, Texas. Appleton, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is here. So we're covered. Washington is here. I was spending hours last night in the Division 2. So I feel like I was in Washington last night. DC. Garland, Texas. Welcome. Myrtle Beach. Virginia is here. A lot of East Coast is checking in. Plano's here. I used to spend quite a bit of time in Plano, worked for companies, their headquarters, or large regional offices were in Plano. So I've flown into the airport and driven around Plano quite a bit. For that, Belgium's here. Nice. Atlanta's here. Houston's here. We've got folks checking in. Thank you for being here. We really could not do this Q&A without you. For Plano, it was not Dell. Oh, there's plenty of companies in Plano. In my particular case, it was not Dell. Nope. Most of my professional career has been working for networking and security companies. So it was Network Associates. It was Plano, Palo Alto Networks. Went to Plano for Palo. Is this quiz live with me? Yes, it is. Well, it's not live at the moment. I've got 2 minutes left, right? So it's almost live with me. We're nearly live. We have a minute and 15 seconds, and we will be live. Washington State, California, there's the West Coast. Welcome. We're wondering where you were. I try to make the time here. I know it's early on the West Coast. Well, it's early for me. 9 in the morning is early for me. But I try to make it so that Europe could check in and West Coast could check in and do it live rather than watching the replay. The replay's fine. There's nothing wrong with the replay, but it's kind of nice to be here live. Lehigh Acres, LA, as we say, here in Florida, checking in. South Carolina, another South Carolina. Baltimore, Maryland is here. Another Maryland. My Maryland. Lots of that going on. Tennessee, the West Coast there. Oh, JV worked for Checkpoint. So I replaced a lot of Checkpoint boxes. Sorry about that. Sorry, JV. Swapped out a lot of Checkpoint machines. Sorry. It wasn't your fault, though. Had nothing to do with you. San Diego, welcome. Thank you, West Coast, for being here. Do I have plans on making sample questions? Boy, do I have plans on making sample questions. We can talk all about it. Right now, though, it is time to get started. Let's go, everybody. It's Network Plus. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2019 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group, coming to you live from the world headquarters of Messer Studios here in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you for joining us on this live stream. Although you could be watching the replay, which is fine as well, you'll still be able to follow along for this first hour of Q&A. We've got plenty of questions and answers focused on Network Plus. And unlike other videos you might find where they're simply going through questions and answers, we're going to look at the question, we're going to look at the answer, find out why the answer was right, and maybe more importantly, find out why an answer might have been wrong. And sometimes that helps just as much as anything else. We'll step through a ton of questions about Network Plus here in this first hour, as many as we can get to anyway. And then we will open up the phone lines in the second hour. You're welcome to call in on the after show. I'll give you all the information about that as we go along. Thank you for your support in being here. Of course, all of my videos are available for you to watch for free online. Every minute of every video is right there. There is also offline versions as well, but we also have a weekly Network Plus tip of or Q&A. It's a pop quiz question every Tuesday. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that, professormesser.com/Twitter. And of course, all my videos are on YouTube. You can easily get there by going to professormesser.com/YouTube. There is also offline versions of my videos and audio versions that you could purchase. You can find out all about those at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Those include video versions, audio versions. My course notes are available with that. We'll talk all about the course notes in a bit, but those are available for you as an option as well. But of course, everything is free online. So find the way that works for you and go with that. I've also got questions available, Network Plus questions. They are on my online pop quiz section of my website, professormesser.com/popquiz. And that pop quiz is available. There are pop quizzes available for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. It's an archive of what we have done in previous study groups. So maybe that will help you as well to be able to do some Q&A directly from the Network Plus exam. This entire study group is also archived into audio podcast format, and you're welcome to listen in while you're driving somewhere. If you don't want to have the video up and running, you have a podcast application that will download this automatically. You can subscribe to the feed, and as soon as I post the podcast every month, it's automatically downloaded to your mobile device or whatever you use to listen to your podcast. Maybe it's your watch these days. I have no idea. People are using these the audio files in ways I wasn't even expecting. So you're welcome to do so. You can find all of those for all of my study groups at professormesser.com/podcast. You can also play them from that page as well. When you come back to this study group tomorrow, if you're on YouTube watching the replay, you'll notice on YouTube that there is an extensive index of everything that we did. The intro, question number 1, answer number 1, question number 2, answer number 2, and the after show. All those questions are indexed by timestamp. It's a great resource that's available. My marketing manager, Lori, pores over this, has to listen to me for the entire study group and puts all of this in there the following day or so. So 1 or 2 days later, you'll find this enormous index is there. And thanks to her, and you go back to any of my study groups, really for the past year plus, and we started doing that. So hopefully that will help you find things you're looking for when you look at these study groups. Today, we're going to talk about the Network Plus certification. Network Plus is currently a version called the N10007. That's the version of the exam that you will be taking. So you want to be sure that all of your study materials are matching N10007. If your study materials say N10006, N10005, N10004, those are the wrong study materials. You do not want to use those. You only want to use N10007. Your study materials should match the version of the exam that you plan to take. And the only version of the exam available is the N10007. It came out on March the 1st, 2018, so it's been out about a year. So it's a relatively new exam in the world of CompTIA. You'll probably see a new Network Plus show up in a couple of years. So we're talking 2020. You might see, no, even further than that, 2021, you will see a new version of the Network Plus exam. So you don't have to worry right now that anything is changing with the exam objectives. You don't have to worry that the exam is going away. You can concentrate on passing based on the exam objectives from the N10007. When you sit down for the exam, it's 90 minutes long. You might get 90 questions. You probably will get less. We aren't sure exactly how many you will get. Everybody's test is a little bit different, but the maximum number you could possibly be asked is 90 questions. These are a combination of two different kinds of questions. We're very accustomed to multiple choice questions on exams. They ask you a question and they give you 4 or 5 options, A, B, C, D, or E. So that's one of the things that you'll find. But there are also performance-based questions. On the exam, performance-based questions are questions that are anything but a multiple choice. You might be asked to fill in the blank. You might be asked to perform a function at a command line. You may be asked to put things in a particular order from fastest to slowest. Maybe put bandwidths in order from lowest to highest. You never know exactly what they're going to be asking. It might be drag and drop. It could be very different, but it will always focus on the objectives that you learn directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. That should really be your very first stop in your studies, is to download and look and read through. Don't just download them, but actually read the objectives. You can find those by going to the Google machine, typing in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to the page, or you can use my link to redirect you over to the CompTIA website, professormesser.com/objectives, and it will take you directly to the page where you can download those. Make sure you have the objectives. Everything we do today and everything in all of my videos comes directly from the CompTIA objectives. My training course goes through every single topic directly from those objectives. I cross them out as I make the video. I make sure we're covering everything. So that way you know that you're covering everything. And it makes a nice checklist too. When you're done or you're thinking, am I ready to take the exam? You can use those objectives as a nice checklist to see if maybe you know it. So that's a good thing to think about. Today we're going to be doing Q&A, interactive Q&A. I will ask the question, and you online, through the magic of the internet, will be able to vote on what you think the correct answer is. And then we'll look at the answers, we'll look at your votes, and we'll see how everyone voted. And we'll see if we all got it right. We'll see if we all maybe did not get it right. We're never quite sure exactly what might be going on there. So feel free to have a look at that. The way that you get to the voting or the Q&A section is to go to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. And that will, of course, help you get to a question. There's a question waiting for you, in fact. So if you go there right now, you will see that there's a question waiting for you. Make sure you have a look at that. There's also an app available for your mobile device. This app is called the Socrative Student app. You're welcome to download that from your favorite app store, depending on what platform you have. That Socrative Student app might ask you for a room. And the room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right, or you'll be in a room with nobody else, and there'll be no question if you're here live. Now, if you're not here watching live, if you're watching this in the replay, this is some other time other than a Wednesday, March the 13th at 12 noon Eastern time, then you are watching a replay, and this will not be available to you because it's something interactive. But you're welcome to come back when we're having a live event and follow along. You can find the live event calendar events at professormesser.com/calendar, or hit the calendar link at the top of the website. If you did all of those things right, this will be the question waiting for you that asks, which of these technologies would be the best choice for encrypting terminal communication across the network? This is a question we had last month. I call this our study group rewind. This is a way that we're going to use to check to see, do we really know if the Q&A is working properly? This is our Q&A of the Q&A. This is our quality assurance process of the Q&A. Did I set everything else right? Configure all of this properly? And so there's our study group rewind question. The possible answers are SSL, SFTP, DTLS, SSH, and TLS. So which of these technologies would be the best choice for encrypting terminal communication across the network? Is it SSL, SFTP, DTLS, SSH, or TLS? And as you can see interactively, you can see as you're voting, 74% of you have chosen SSH. That's a pretty strong answer. 13% said SSL, and then single digits for TLS, DTLS, and SFTP. So which one would it be? Well, I think with the 77% now, some of you I think are piling on. Some of you saw that it was 74% and thought, I'm just going to choose that one. I'm just not even sure, but we're going with it. I can't blame you for that. I'm fine with that. The answer indeed is SSH. Secure Shell is what SSH stands for. Secure Shell is an encrypted communication to use at the command line, at a console. It's a console command that you would be able to run and encrypt a tunnel to another device and be able to work at the command line. So as a network administrator, you're going to be administering switches and routers and firewalls and load balancers, and the list goes on and on and on. So to be able to communicate to those devices, instead of you grabbing a laptop, walking to where the device is and physically plugging in, we'll simply connect across the network. But of course, we don't want to connect across the network in a way that people would be able to see our username and password, like Telnet might. That's why we don't use Telnet anymore, which is in the clear. If somebody was capturing packets, they'd get your username and password very easily. So instead we use Secure Shell, SSH. That was the right answer. So those of you that did answer option D, SSH, the 77% of you got that one right. And indeed, that was the answer from last month. You either knew the answer or you remembered the answer, and either way is fine with me. If you get something on the exam related to secure console communication, you now know exactly what that's going to be. One of the things that you'll find on the Network Plus exam is the first set of exam questions are not multiple choice. This throws some people. They sit down for the exam and they report back after and say, whoa, I was not ready for the crazy questions at the beginning. What was that? Well, those were the performance-based questions that I mentioned earlier. You're going to get this handful of questions at the beginning, and they just go on and on. It seems like they're not going to stop. People get into these questions. There might be 3 or 4 or 5 or more, but they get into them and thinking, this is the entire exam. I'm never going to pass this exam. But you will. It's just a handful of questions. The rest of the exam is multiple choice. But on my study groups, I like to do a question first that's going to be a performance-based question. So here's the question I have for you. I didn't really number this one. You can just answer them in order as we go, but this is more of a fill in the blank. I guess it could be a drag and drop if you look at it this way. But it's one that is going to ask you a question in a similar style, in a similar vein to the performance-based questions that we get on the exam. So here is our first question of the day, which is really a performance-based question that asks, what class is associated with these IP addresses? And I'm listing out 6 IP addresses here, and I want to know the class of these IP addresses. For those of you listening on the podcast, I will go through each address so you can hear them. So the first address is 165.245.192.168. The second address is 10.10.10.10. The third address is 124.192.168.124. The fourth address is 220.1.190.2. The fifth address is 194.6.7.8. And the last address, 191.33.9.120. So those are 6 valid IPv4 addresses that you could use to be able to answer these. I'm going to go through them again for those listening in. Folks are already starting to put these in the fill in the blank. You can simply put them in with commas between. You're doing a fine job. Some of you are writing out Class A, Class B. That's fine too. That's probably how I would have done it because I like to type things, apparently. So here's those questions again. 165.245.192.168. The next address is 10.10.10.10. The next address is 124.192.168.124. The next address is 220.1.190.2. The fifth address is 194.6.7.8. And the last address, 191.33.9.120. Lots of addresses there. What class is associated with those addresses? What class? There's no class associated with this. We've got a number of answers in. A number of you are finally realizing, oh, I think I know what these happen to be. You're plugging in your answers. You were able to Google the chart you were looking for. Don't Google. Stop Googling this. We're going to figure out what this happens to be. I'm going to give you a description of what this happens to be. Let's bring up the chart so you can see it. I'm going to bring this up on the screen. We're going to bring up my chart of information. Here is the chart of subnet classes. The only thing we're really most important that we need from this particular chart are the first two columns and really the first three rows. So our first three rows of Class A, Class B, and Class C. And the thing we want to know is the first number in the IPv4 address, that first octet, we call it because it's 8 bits long. That first octet is really defined using the leading bits. But for the purposes of what we're doing, let's just look at what those bits are configured as in decimal. So let's not worry about the binary. Let's focus on the decimal side. A Class A address, the first number is number 1 through 126. For a Class B address, the IPv4 address starts with a number 128 through number 191. And for a Class C address, the IP address starts with an octet that begins with 192 through 223. So let's go back to see how we did with this. I'm going to bring up the answer sheet. We can have a look at the answer sheet, the answer page, and see how we did with this. So our question, here we go. We've got 165.245.192.168. We look at the first number. The first number is a 165. And if we go back to our chart and look at that, or memorize our chart in our head, hopefully that's what you're doing. You're not Googling the chart. You'll know that that is a Class B address. The 165 falls in that range for Class B, so that's defined as a Class B address. That's our starting point when we start performing our subnetting, is that Class B. Then we had the numbers 10.10.10.10, a completely legitimate address. I think I have a 10.10.10.10 on my network. And since it's the number 10 at the first number, that's a Class A address. Let's do the next one. That number 124.192.168.124. Remember, the most important number from a class perspective is that first number of 124, and that falls into the range of a Class A. The fourth address is 220.1.190.2. It's that 220 that's the most important one. So we've got Class C. That's where that 220 falls. Another one that is 194.6.7.8. 194.6.7.8. It's the 194 we want to know about. The 194 falls into a Class C. And the last number is a 191.33.9.120. 191. Now we have to figure out that 191 is a pretty high number, but we have to also remember where the cutoff is for Class B and Class C. So we know the 191 is in the Class B range. So everything there is Class B from that 128 through the 191. So there is the list of IP address classes that we would focus on. If you don't know the contents of that chart, make sure you're familiar with everything that's there. This chart's going to be very important. Really the most important part of that Class A, B, and C. You don't necessarily have to remember the bits. The subnet mask becomes very useful there as well. Make sure you know the subnet masks that are associated with Class A, Class B, and Class C as default, because from there, you will begin subnetting across. In the chat room, people are asking, so would you see Class D or Class E? You certainly could. Class D is a multicast range. If there are multicast addresses, multicast applications being used on your network, you will probably see multicast. A lot of routing protocols and enterprise type applications that use multicast will use an IP address in that range. It is not an IP address that is commonly assigned to a device. It is more used for a device to communicate to other devices that are in that same multicast group. So that's something you might see. Class C, though, is reserved. That's not like we're waiting on somebody else to show up. That's reserved as in we will never use that on a network. So if you're in a lab, technically, Class E could be used in a lab to do something. In reality, in actual practice, we just never use Class E. It's reserved, so we don't use it. If we're in a lab, we tend to use a 10 dot address. We use one of the RFC 1918 addresses, one of the private IP address ranges. and use those instead. So we would not find a Class E being used anywhere for those. Now, you will find if you start performing a network analysis, if you start capturing packets on your own local network, you may find some multicast running on your local network. You may find a router sending that. You might find an application that's sending something starting with 224 through 239. So that's one of those things to think about. So the people in the chat room are saying, so we can't use those 240 through 254, all the addresses that you could possibly have in that range you can't use. That's right. Can't use them. Not there. Not available. And if you try to use them, I would expect your network devices would not route them, or they should not route them. They should not firewall them. They should not be able to be sent anywhere on your network except maybe in a local subnet. They could be routed. I bet they're routed, but they certainly are not going to go across the internet. It's one of those that you will just not see in practical use. So well done. If you answered those, it's BAACCB. You got them absolutely right. Well done with that. How's that for a performance-based question? Let's now skip over performance-based questions. Now let's go to multiple choice questions. Maybe that's what we can focus on now and get out of this idea of performance-based. I have a multiple choice question. This one's more of a visual question. So those of you on the podcast, this might not work for you so much, but it is a picture of a connector. It's a picture of a connector, and it says, what connector is this? A good question. What connector is that? I have some options for you. I didn't just leave you hanging. You can choose A, B, C, D, or E with those. What connector is this? You have the option. If I show you the right page, here we go. The option for looking at what is the right connector, is it an MTRJ? Is it an ST? Is it an LC? Is it an SC? Or is it an RS? So your options are MTRJ, ST, LC, SC, and RS. Those of you listening in are wondering what all these terms are. The MTRJ, the Sierra Tango, ST, the Lima Charlie, LC, the Sierra Charlie, SC, and the Romeo Sierra RS. So you've got some options there. Now, if you think you know what the option is, you think you know what this is, please don't put any answers in the chat room. Don't put any hints in the chat room. Don't think about those. You instead want to be able to treat this as if you were sitting at the exam. We're going to take a guess. We're going to put it in by going to professormesser.com/QA. So that's the way to do it. Find out what connector that is. I think I have a bigger picture of this that might help. There we go. Maybe that will help a little bit in figuring out what type of connector is that really. Is it really? This is one you do need to know for sure for an exam. This is a connector that's in the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you know what those happen to be. This is one where it really does help to get a perspective of what it might be. So hopefully you'll have a feeling of what these might be. And again, please, no hints or answers in the chat room. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is one that you do need to know. In fact, you'll probably run into this type of connector, certainly, if you start working through the network side of things. You're going to run into this eventually. Let's see how we did with this. Let's see. We've got 97 people that have answered. So let's see, almost 100. And if we look at the answers, 53% of us, a little bit of a majority, about half of us have said SC, Sierra Charlie. We've got 22% of us that said LC, Lima Charlie. 17% said ST, Sierra Tango. And then you've got single digits for MTRJ and RS, Romeo Sierra. So we've got half of us really do think it's SC, but the other half of us think this is probably something else. But what is it really? Well, let's have a look at this type of connector. This is indeed a SC connector, a subscriber connector, as it is sometimes called. It is also sometimes called a standard connector. There's nothing standard about it, though. That's not like a standard that we use. It's not like it will always be standard. A square connector, S-Q-A-R-E, square connector. It is square. It is a little bit of a square, isn't it? That's one of the best ways to think about it. But other connectors are also square, so we can't always rely on that as the best descriptor of what this might be. We just know that this one happens to be square and we can use it that way. Don't know that that's the best way to memorize this. Some people will find, and it's very common to see this as a blue connector. People in the chat room are saying, is this always blue? It seems like a lot of the SC connectors you find are blue, but they are not always. It just happens to be that the plastic that we use is one that is blue, but you will find different colors of SC connectors as well. In fact, I have some that are colored different colors, but it's the same on both ends. So it's a pair of SCs. One side is red and one side is white, for example, on the connector. And it stays red and white all the way through, which is really useful because if you're connecting one side to transmit and receive, you have to connect the other side to receive and transmit. Is that making sense? The transmit has to go to a receive, and the receive has to go to a transmit if it is the standard half duplex fiber type connection. Now, it gets a little different for bidirectional and other types of fiber connections, but for the vast majority of what you will find, one side is transmit, one side is receive. So the side that's transmitting has to plug into the receive side on the other side. So it's useful to have different colors so that you can see what's plugged in on this one, and then you can swap them and plug them in separately on the other side. Otherwise, you're doing what I always do, which is plug it in. It's not working. Let's swap and plug in the other side to see if it works. So that's the other way to do it. Either way works, as it turns out. Functionally, it works, but it's kind of nice to get it done right the first time, isn't it? So that's one that you have to think about. So this is the SC connector. All of these are connector types. The MTRJ, the ST, the LC, the RS. RS is not a connector type. RS is one like RS232, which is what I put in there. It's not really a fiber type. I kind of threw that one in to see what we would get. But the MTRJ, the ST, and the LC are all fiber connector types. Those are you only have to know 4 fiber connector types for the Network Plus exam, and there's all 4 of them. If you're unfamiliar with these fiber connectors, make sure you look at this video, which is, there it is, in section 2.1, my video called Optical Fiber Connectors. That's where you will find the description of the optical fiber connectors. I named it so perfectly because that's what's in the video. That's one we focus on. Try to make them just the right size with just the right content for all of those details. Well done with that. Half of you got that one right. I try to shoot for half of you getting these questions right. I kind of shoot for half of you getting these questions wrong. I'm very sorry, but now you know. It wouldn't be any fun if everybody got 100% every time, and you wouldn't learn anything either. So getting them wrong is actually the best possible result. That's the best thing that can turn out from this particular study group is you getting every single one of these questions wrong. It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's not the exam. There's nothing to lose here. Speaking of nothing to lose, let's do another question. Here we go. This one's a long question. Let me read through it. A manufacturing company has built a disaster recovery site that maintains an exact hardware duplicate of their data center, and all software is synchronized between the sites every hour. Which of the following would best describe this site? Would it be a hot site? Would it be load balanced? Would it be snapshot? Would it be hybrid? Or would it be clustering? We've got 5 different options. A manufacturing company has built a disaster recovery site that maintains an exact hardware duplicate of their data center, and all software is synchronized between the sites every hour. Which of the following would best describe this site? Hot site, load balanced, snapshot, hybrid, or clustering? Maybe you know the answer. The chat room people are saying expensive. That best describes the site. Wasn't an option, but if I had put that, that would have been the best option because those are expensive. Can you imagine having a separate data center from Haddon Industries that is exact duplicate of exactly what's there? You put all of this in, all the software synchronized every hour, just tons of information going back and forth. Just remarkable to figure these out. Some people in the chat room saying, just watch the video on this. So I bet you got it absolutely right. Some people are asking about CEU credits for watching this. You do actually get a CEU credit for watching this if you perform. Well, I'll talk more about it in a bit. You have to keep watching. I'll tell you exactly how to get the CEU credit. It's a webinar-based credit. So it's, I think for Network Plus, you can collect 6 of them in a 3-year period. I think that's the right number. Check the CompTIA stats. They'll tell you for sure to have that there. That's useful to have that capability. So make sure you go through that list to figure out all of those details. Let's see how we did. A number of you have answered this one, so I think it's worth going through that. For those of you, by the way, connecting on Socrative through the app, the room name is Professor Messer, Professormesser. Make sure you spell it right. Some folks in the chat room not quite spelling it, not quite right, but it's close enough. No, it's not close enough. It cannot be close enough. It does have to be quite perfectly correct when you're going in there. Let's see how we did for this question. Well, 64%, a decent majority, said A, hot site. 18% of you said snapshot. 11% said load balanced. And then single digits, 4% said clustering, and 3% said hybrid. So what would this site be that is an exact duplicate of what's there? Not only an exact duplicate of hardware, but an exact duplicate of software. It's ready to go in an instant. You could flip a switch and everyone would be using this site, and that would be a hot site, which is exactly what's designed to be. It's as it implies, it's hot and ready to go. The instant you wanted to move everybody over to that site, you can flip a button, zoop, everybody's over there. It has all of the same hardware that you're currently running, all of the same software. It really is a complete duplicate of your data center running in some other location. Why would somebody even do that? As someone mentioned in the chat room, that sounds awfully expensive. It is awfully expensive. It's incredibly expensive. But imagine the expense that the company would have if suddenly the data center was unavailable. How much money would that cost? We've got these situations where it could be a natural disaster. A hurricane could come through and blow away the data center. These things have happened. In Hurricane Andrew in Miami, there were data centers where mainframe computers were left on their sides. All the windows blown out. The building was effectively gutted by the hurricane. The mainframes were on their side. You're not recovering from that. There's no way. Okay, everybody, let's push the mainframe back up. Okay, we're back up and running. That's not going to happen. There was no power. There was nothing. Everything was blown away. So what do? I believe that was Burger King's data center that happened to. And it was many people's data centers that happened to when Hurricane Andrew came through. So you have to think about if for a company like that their entire business runs on that data center, you better have another data center somewhere ready to go. So very useful to have that there. The idea is that if there was a problem, somebody could call the disaster, and as soon as you flip the switch, everybody moves from the one data center and whoop, they are now all going to the hot data center. That now becomes your active data center. So that becomes an important part of the questions and the answers that we look through. The hot site is the right answer. Hot site, 65% of you chose that. 17% of you chose the snapshot site. A snapshot term commonly used in virtual networking and virtual servers, it's virtual services, and it's designed to capture the state of a particular server at any point in time. That way, if later on you make a change that is something that you perhaps did not quite like and you wanted to go back to a previous configuration, you could go back to an earlier snapshot. But the snapshot is not a separate piece of hardware. It's not at a different site. It's not running everything that you're running. It's not active at all. It's just a file that's saved somewhere in case you need to recover. Think of it more as a backup than anything. A snapshot is not a backup, but you can think of it that way. There are many things that are not a backup. A snapshot is definitely not one of those. We have load balanced. In the case of a disaster recovery situation, and in this particular question, there was no mention of load balancing. A load balancing is where both sites are being used simultaneously. And it has its own complications, as you can imagine. Imagine running an application at two different places, that it's duplicated. You have two different databases. Well, if you're balancing between those two, how do you keep the databases synchronized? In this case, the synchronization is occurring every hour. Your database is well out of date an hour. So it would not be load balanced. Load balancing is what you're getting right now. If you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, you could be on one of a couple of different web servers. So you're coming into one place, and then I'm re-diverting you down to a different web server. But it all goes back to one database. It gets complicated when you start doing load balancing. This particular question, there was no mention of load balancing. In fact, the idea that you're synchronizing every hour implies that you really are not load balancing. So that would not be a good way to do it. Couldn't a load balancer be used to flip the switch? No, that's not what you use a load balancer for. Load balancer is all live in real time, literally balancing the load in real time between services. You could have, of course, many sites or many servers balanced, but they're all live and running. Flipping a switch, you would not need a load balancer for that. Sometimes it's changing a route in a routing table. Log into your router, click a few buttons. Now everybody's going to a new route. You don't need a separate device for all of that. Hybrid is a type of virtual networking configuration that combines maybe using your own private cloud and a public cloud. Combine those two, use a little bit of each. That's a hybrid cloud. It's a cloud term. And then clustering is when you use multiple servers to be able to effectively load balance without using a load balancer. It's a feature built into the operating system itself. Think of load balancing within the operating system. That's clustering for the way it works. In this case, for this scenario, the only possible answer, and the one that would indeed best describe the site, is a hot site. That is the right answer. The 66% of you did get that one absolutely correct. Well done. There is plenty of details about networking and connectors and protocols and encryption and all kinds of things on the exam. So I want you to be able to go through every single one of my videos. And of course, I highly recommend that you take notes, that you have a good book, that you watch the videos, that you get plenty of Q&A, and you get plenty of hands-on. But I also recommend that those notes become a very useful tool for you. Now, some of you don't have time to go through every single video. And of course, all of my videos have these graphics and charts that I've created, and it's sometimes difficult to replicate those outside the video. So I've done it for you. This is my study group, my course notes here in the study group. These course notes have a single book, single PDF, or a single physical book that contains all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the tables from every single one of my Network Plus videos, all in one place. You can find out about these professormesser.com/NPCN7. That stands for Network Plus Course Notes 7. I have the Network Plus Course Notes up on my screen right here, as a matter of fact. There they are. So they're provided as a PDF. You can purchase them right now and download them immediately and have them available, completely indexed. They are 66 pages long, extensive. Here's just the first couple pages where I'm taking all the content. There's all the port numbers. There's the information about Ethernet. There's broadcast domains, multicast. We talked about unicasts and broadcasts and multicast earlier. The description of all that's there. The breakdown of MAC addresses. Everything that's in every video, it's in here. So this is a great place to go to find all of those details. And every single penny of this goes back to keeping the website going. So that's another nice part about this as well. And I appreciate the folks in the chat room saying, "Yep, I have this. It's fantastic." Some folks are saying that I'm pricing it too low. That's okay. We'll keep it priced low. I want you to be able to have this information accessible. That's one of the challenges that we have when we're working on certification exams. Is all of the content it costs money to get a certification, to learn what you need, not just to take the certification exam, but just to get everything you need. So the videos are free, but sometimes you need a little more, and this is an option. Some of you have even said, "I want to contribute to the site, but I don't take donations. I want to give you something for the money that you're spending." So this is a nice middle ground. So you can purchase these course notes for $20. I also, by the way, have physical versions of these. There's the physical version of the course notes. It's the same content. There's nothing different in the physical version except it's made from dead trees. That's the only difference. But Mrs. Professor Messer told me she likes physical books better than PDFs when she's studying for exams, because she has had to study for many professional exams, being a nurse and taking care of me. So all of this is in this physical book. Now, if you get the physical book, by the way, I give you the digital version for free along with it. So while you're waiting on this to be delivered, you can still immediately download that PDF version and have it available. Thanks for your support here. This keeps everything going. This keeps this craziness alive. Find out more about this, professormesser.com/NPCN7, or use the links from the top of the website to find the Network Plus course notes. Let's do more Q&A. Got plenty of Q&A to go through. Here's one. Let me get it up on the screen so I can change it on your side. There we go. And the question asks, a security administrator would like to limit the number of devices that can communicate through a switch interface. Which of the following would allow this functionality? Which of the following would allow this functionality? Here are your possible options. Is it STP, FloodGuard, DHCP snooping, VLAN trunking, BPDU guard? Those are 5 actual real networking things. But which one is it? So the question again is that a security administrator would like to limit the number of devices that can communicate through a switch interface. Which of the following would allow this functionality? Would it be STP, FloodGuard, DHCP snooping, VLAN trunking, or BPDU guard? Which of those would it be? Which? If you think you know the answer, please, no answering in the chat room. No hints. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. I don't know what the QA stands for, but that's what it is. It's professormesser.com/QA. You'll be able to figure out which one of those this might be. This may be a little more difficult, but this is all of these topics, by the way, all of those possible answers and this particular topic, all part of the exam objectives. So not only do you have to know the answer to this question, you have to know what all the other answers are to this question. So that's an important consideration as you're going through this. And if you're looking at the answers and thinking, I'm not really sure what that is, make a note. Must read more about the thing here that I don't know what it is. Hopefully your notes are better than that. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're like mine. My problem is I can't read them afterwards. My handwriting is so bad that I have to type everything. Sometimes I can write and figure it out later on. I used to write a lot on planes. I used to travel a lot. I'd be on an airplane. I would just write. I get on the plane and I'd be writing about this. I'm trying to build this crazy business. And how do we do that? What do we do? What would it look like? And I'm just making notes. It's sort of a free form kind of thing. And writing. And the people in chat room indeed are correct that I will not get better at writing if I avoid it. Got news for you. It doesn't get any better at this point. I have missed whatever window it was to work better about writing. So you get to a certain age and it's just not happening. But at that point, I still have these notes, by the way. I should bring them out one of these times and let you see them. But I have all the notes that I kept, just stacks of yellow pages. I would just go through and just write notes about what if I did this? What if the video had this in it? What if we worked this way? And we just tried all kinds of different things. So that's I'm not sure how I got into that, but that's where that came from. Let's see. The security administrator would like to limit the number of devices that can communicate through a switch interface. Which of the following would allow this functionality? We're not sure. You can see we're very torn. It's almost a 3-way tie. Although if we go with the number one here, 37% of you said FloodGuard. FloodGuard would be the way to do it. 28% of you said BPDU guard, the other guard. 24% said VLAN trunking. 8% said STP. And 4% said DHCP snooping. So how could you limit the number of devices that we're communicating through a switch interface? This can be really useful, by the way, for limiting this. Maybe you want to be sure that if you're connecting one device to a switch, that would be the only device that would ever be able to communicate on that particular physical switch interface. That would prevent somebody from showing up and unplugging from the back of someone's desk computer and plugging into their own computer, for example. So the way that you do that is the way that 37% of you thought that it would be to begin with, which is FloodGuard. That's exactly what it is. Now, when we think of it as flooding is one device communicating, two devices communicating through a single switch port is completely normal. You don't often think of that as a flood, but you could certainly configure it to limit the number. That's what FloodGuard does, is allow you to limit exactly how many people should be able to communicate through a particular interface. So you get to decide, is 2 the number? Is 3 too many? Is 100 too many? You get to make that determination and figure out what that is. And you can even define very specific MAC addresses, effectively do MAC filtering on this as well, combine those two things together. So the switch is responsible and constantly watching communication. And as the number of MAC addresses shows up, it makes a note of them. It keeps track. It's like that security guard watching people drive in. Where are you going? Let's see your identification. Let's get your tag number. Go ahead. And maybe that's it. Nobody else can come through. We've got your tag number. We know exactly what it is. Nobody else can drive through this particular interface on the switch. Once you have passed that number, once you've tripped the flood guard, now you can decide as the system administrator, as the network administrator, what you want to have happen. Do you just want to get a notice? Do you want a warning? Do you want something to go into the log? Do you want to turn the switch interface off completely? That would be good. You got some options there. But you get to decide what the result of that happens to be when you're using FloodGuard. And that is a very, very useful security tool that you can use. Maybe you're wondering, is somebody connecting to the network and I don't know about it? I don't want to let them know I'm on to them. Let's just have it log the information and send me a text message when it happens. So FloodGuard would be the right answer. 38% of you chose FloodGuard. I didn't get 50%. So I feel like I failed there. I want to get at least 50% getting it right. I don't really want 100% of people to get it wrong. That's not what we're after. I want them to be hard, but not too hard for this. So 38% of you, FloodGuard was the right answer. Let's go through some of these other answers, though. BPDU guard. Why would it not be BPDU guard? BPDU is the Bridge Protocol Data Unit. That is the protocol that's used by Spanning Tree so that all the switches know where all the other switches are. They're all talking to each other and sending messages, sending hello messages, sending configuration messages, all using BPDUs. One of the things that's a challenge with Spanning Tree is that if you've configured a port for Spanning Tree and you turn on a device that's connected to that port, before it lets you talk onto the network, it checks with everybody else to make sure that you're not going to cause a loop. Now, if you're a workstation, well, of course you're not going to cause a loop. You're the only one connected to this. And so you can configure your switches with a setting that says, we think the only thing that will ever plug into this interface is a workstation. So don't go through the whole Spanning Tree, wait to see if there's a loop, check in with everyone else. We don't have time for that. We want this workstation to be on the network immediately and working. But if you ever see a Bridge Protocol Data Unit come from this particular interface, turn off the port, because that should not be happening. That's what BPDU guard does. Along the same lines, we'll jump up here to answer A, which was Spanning Tree Protocol. Spanning Tree Protocol doesn't do anything about limiting the number of devices. Its job is to prevent any loops on a switch network. That's all it focuses on. That's what STP is. That kind of fits into the BPDU guard answer as well. We had a number of you, 24%, chose VLAN trunking. VLAN trunking, very useful for segmenting the network into logical subnets, but it doesn't do anything for limiting the number of devices that would communicate through a switch interface. You aren't saying, here's a VLAN and only allow 2 people to be on this VLAN. Everybody who's on that VLAN is going to be able to communicate. VLAN trunking itself doesn't provide any way to limit. It is, of course, segmenting, but it's not providing any limitation of that. And in this question, we're really looking at the number of devices that can communicate through an individual switch interface, not as everyone communicating on an individual VLAN. 8% of you, we did STP, and the last one, DHCP snooping. DHCP snooping is designed to prevent a rogue DHCP server from suddenly appearing on the network, which can cause massive chaos. As someone who's been in that situation before, you don't want a DHCP server suddenly arriving and handing out IP addresses and it's not authorized. And DHCP snooping does that, but DHCP snooping does nothing to limit the number of devices that can communicate through a switch interface. That's not the design of DHCP snooping. The only real answer on this one's going to be FloodGuard. If you answered B, FloodGuard, the 39% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. I mentioned earlier that you can get continuing education unit credit for watching this, what CompTIA calls a webinar, this live event that we are streaming on the internet. The number of webinar CEUs that you can get in a single 3-year renewal period, I think for Network Plus it's 6. So wouldn't it be nice if you could just watch all of my study groups and then you've got enough CEUs? Well, it doesn't work that way. But if you are still someone who needs continuing education unit credits, here's how you would be able to get a digitally signed email from me giving you that continuing education unit credit. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. And on that Contact Us link, it's going to ask for your name. It's going to ask for your email address. Make sure you put that right, or I won't be able to email you. There's a physics problem there. And then it's going to ask you to put information in a box. You're going to want maybe even a subject line too. And in the box, you want to be able to tell me that this is the March 2019 Network Plus study group. And very plainly in there, put the words, let's pick one. I like BPDU guard just because it sounds funny. BPDU has a funny onomatopoeia kind of thing going on there. BPDU. BPDU guard is the super secret code word of the month. So in that message, put BPDU guard very plainly in there. Please don't try to hide it in a sentence to me. It's hard for me to read through those and see if it's in there anywhere. I get scared I'm going to delete somebody's CEU instead of sending it back to them. And I don't want to do that. Make it very plain. And then, of course, you can put anything else you want in there to me. These are all coming to me. So if you wanted to put any message in there, you're more than welcome to do that. It's whatever you'd like. So that makes it easy to be able to make that happen. So that is, you get one webinar-based CEU by doing that. So feel free to do that. Okay, it's 6. Somebody at least checked and double-checked on me. I think you checked in the chat room that you get a maximum of 6 in a 3-year renewal period for Network Plus. So for Security Plus, I think it's 10. For A Plus, it's 4. And this particular live study group will apply to any of those through. And of course, outside of the CompTIA, some people use these for other reasons as well. So you need to check in with the people taking the CEUs from you as to how that might be done. So it'll be 1 hour of the webinar-based CEU. So that's how you do it. If you, by the way, follow some other method to get that to me, doesn't work. The actual process of doing this makes me know that you watched the webinar. See how that works? It's really not that difficult either. It's not like we're solving some type of issue here. We're not curing cancer. We're just sending me a CEU. Let's do another question, though. We'll figure this out. Here's the next question that asks, click on my side so you can see it. A network engineer is concerned, see, I'm already spelling things wrong. A network engineer is concerned that nearby wireless networks may be interfering with internal wireless communication. Which of these could be used to verify this concern? First, we have people were earlier talking about wanting an editor. I'm thinking, I don't need an editor. That's ridiculous. I clearly need an editor. Look at this. A network engineer is concerned that nearby wireless networks may be interfering with internal wireless communication. Which of these could be used to verify this concern? Would it be a multimeter, a tone generator, a spectrum analyzer, a loopback plug, or a TDR? So there are your options. It's a multimeter, a tone generator, a spectrum analyzer, a loopback plug, or a TDR. Which one of those? Which one? Maybe you know the answer. Maybe you've done this. This can be very useful. Imagine being in that situation where you got a wireless network. It's not working the way you think it is. And you think maybe there's interference of some kind. What would we do to find that? Maybe you know the answer. If you think you do know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can answer that right there. Don't put any answers in the chat room or hints in the chat room, please. I appreciate that. Figure out those deals. And as people are mentioning, by the way, in the chat room, there are many ways to renew your certification. Collecting CEUs does not happen to be one, but it's just one of the ways to do it. Collecting CEUs is one of many ways to renew your certification. Some people will be taking the CertMaster CE, Cert Master CE is in about 4 to 6 hours, you're renewed for 3 years if it meets certain criteria. Some people will take a higher level certification. So if you have Network Plus that you need to renew, if you take and pass the Security Plus exam, it automatically renews the Network Plus. And there are other third-party certifications you can use as well. I have a video on how to renew your certification in just a few hours, and I go through each one of those so that you can understand what the advantages and disadvantages of both of them might be. You'll find it on my YouTube channel, How to Renew Your Certification in Just a Few Hours, I think was the actual title of that video. Spent a lot of time on that title. You can tell all the work that I put into what I thought, what should I call this video? Easy renewal, how to do, what do I need to do to renew? How to renew your certification, just a couple hours, just a few hours. You can do that as well. Let's see how we did with this one. Well, this is one where we're not really getting a lot of confusion out of what the possible answer might be. 92% of you said spectrum analyzer. 3% said tone generator. 3% said time domain reflectometer, the TDR. 2% said loopback plug. 0% said multimeter. Well, if you run into a situation where you're concerned about wireless, I think everybody who's watching this right now knows exactly what to do. Go get a spectrum analyzer. Now, spectrum analyzers, of course, can be big units, big expensive units. They don't have to be. There are many spectrum analyzers that are designed to look at wireless frequencies and provide you with a breakdown of what it's seeing on a mobile device for a few $100s. But many spectrum analyzers are thousands of dollars to be able to do this. It just depends on how much spectrum and how much granularity you want to have. Sometimes you can find some good prices, though, on the eBay. So those can be pretty useful. Yeah, some of your access point may have spectrum analyzers in the access point itself. Good point in the chat room. So you can see what is the analyzer, what are the built-in analyzer in the access point saying. That becomes useful, too, to be able to see that. You get to see everything that's out there, though. You aren't necessarily sure where the interference is coming from. You aren't at that point yet. There's still more work to be done, but you would be able to see, is the spectrum clear? Is there anything else creating any type of interference on this frequency or some of the surrounding frequencies, which can, of course, bleed into the things that you're listening to. It depends on the receiver. Now we're getting into more like physics of the radio signal. But those folks out there that are amateur radio operators will tell you that the receiver can certainly be locally overloaded with some of these other devices that aren't necessarily communicating on your local frequency, and somehow it's overloading the receiver that's inside of your radio. That happens all the time. If you've ever been watching television or listening to the radio and you're hearing something else communicating, somebody's driving by, there's a police officer driving by and he keyed up his radio, you suddenly hear it on your television. That's a good example of that type of interference, overloading the receiver and being able to see that. So no real question there. No big, super big deal in being able to deal with this. The answer here, 93% of you. There was really no question of what people were thinking on this one and being able to have that there. We got a few minutes left, so let's do another question. We can fit another one in here. Let's do this question and see if you do just as well. See if we can really move forward with this one. The question asks, if I click the button, pardon me, everyone. There we go. The question asks, a developer is designing an application to use network-based remote storage. This application will access information at the block level of the storage device. Which of these technologies would be the best match for this application? Would it be CAN, NAS, MAN, SAN, or WAN? There's a lot of abbreviations there. Let's look at the question again. It asks, a developer is designing an application to use network-based remote storage. This application will access information at the block level of the storage device. Which of these technologies would be the best match for this application? And the possible answers are CAN, NAS, MAN, SAN, or WAN? That's the possible answers. Some people are saying it's tricky. It is not a trick question. It is a very straightforward question. It's just now you got to know all these things. All of those things, by the way, are real things. Those are real network plus exam objective things. I didn't make any of them up. So they're all very straightforward. The problem is not DNS. I could add another one. We could put more in here. This particular front end allows me to put tons of possible answers in. So that's what you want to do, is be able to figure out those different pieces. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. Please don't put any comments in the chat room about the question that would lead someone down the road of solving it. We're going to try to figure this out. If you don't know what it is, take a guess. This is a very good, useful exam tip for you, which is take a guess. From what we know of the grading process for the exams, and we don't know a lot because CompTIA doesn't tell us a lot, but what we know is that answering a question wrong doesn't work against you. It isn't not penalized against you. They don't take points away if you get a question wrong. So you don't lose anything for guessing. So if you don't know what a question is, never leave it blank. You definitely get 0 points for leaving it blank. You get 0 points for getting it wrong. You get some points for getting it right. So you have never submit your exam with questions that have not been answered. Always answer it. Choose A. Make an educated guess, as they mentioned in the chat room. Always do a Christmas tree. I don't care. Just put whatever you want in, but put something in so that at least you've answered it. And on a question that has 4 answers, you have a 25% chance. And free points is free points is free points. So that's what we need to work through to figure out all of these. So what would be the best match for this particular application? Let's see how we did. Well, we're a little bit torn. 46% of us said NAS. 41% of us said SAN. 6% said metropolitan area network. That has nothing to do with block level storage. 3% said a CAN, which could be a campus area network or a controller area network. Neither one of those things are associated with block level storage. A wide area network or a WAN, 3% of you chose that one. Not block level storage, but we all focused in on storage technologies. So already this is great. So already if you got some of these answers on your exam, some of you are already throwing out the things that were definitely not part of this. But we're a little torn on whether this is NAS or whether this is SAN. Which one of these could it be? 47% said NAS, 41% said SAN. We're just not sure. So let's look at the differences. NAS is a network attached storage. That's what the NAS stands for. NAS or NAS. I say NAS. Network attached storage is where you take a hard drive, you plug an Ethernet cable into it. It doesn't work quite that way, but that's effectively what you're doing. You're plugging in a hard drive, and now you can access that device across the network, but it's a file level access, which means if you have a 1 gig file and you change 1 byte of that file, you have to copy the entire 1 gig file over to that storage device to update that file. So you can imagine if you're dealing with very, very large files or many files, that's kind of an inefficient way. It's a 1 gig file and you're just changing 1 byte. Why are you having to copy the entire file? Because that's the way a NAS works. It's not very smart with NAS working. So that's the one we have to worry about. There are keywords in here and figuring out all of those things. So we have to figure out those details. So the one that we were looking for, storage area network, a SAN. A SAN is what all of the big companies will have as their storage on their network, because a SAN works at a block level. And the blocks within a storage device might be 4K, it might be 8K. These are very small groups of blocks that are used. And all those blocks put together make a file. So if you have a 1 gig file and you update 1 byte of that 1 gig file, you only need to copy over the 4K or 8K block that would change in that file. That's it. You don't have to copy the entire file again. That's one of the beauties of storage area network. That is very efficient. It's efficient. Maybe you only want to read part of the file, so you only read the blocks you need. You don't have to copy the 1 gig file across, so you can just read a little section of the file. You can see how this can quickly balloon up. Very inefficient to run these applications using a NAS. But if you're at home and maybe you've purchased one of those hard drives that you can plug in that have a network attached storage that you could run in your home to do backups, those are very commonly a NAS. Those are not very commonly a SAN to be able to have that there. In either case, you need a lot of bandwidth. Networking and putting storage out there and sending all of this data, you really can't do it over a slow network. So if you do have an application using storage area networking or network attached storage, you have to make sure you have enough bandwidth. So our correct answer is as it turns out, it's definitely a storage area network. If you chose D, the 43% of you, that was close to 50%. I'll take that. We learned something along the way, didn't we? It's like watching an episode of Fat Albert. We learned something before this was over, which is good too. I like it when we can do that. We've gone through an hour of Q&A, an hour plus of Q&A today. We went into overtime. You twisted my arm, and we did that extra question at the end. But we got plenty more questions to do next month. Come back. I do one of these every month for Network Plus. The next one will be in April the 10th, 2019 is the Network Plus study group for April. That's redundant, but there it is. We have, by the way, a Security Plus study group next Wednesday. If you want to come back for that one, we'll do the same thing with Security Plus questions. And I do an A Plus study group. We did those last week. There's 2 of those. One for the 1001 exam again, and one for the 1002. We're doing Fat Albert in the chat room now. Hey. We are. The goal with all these, of course, is to get us ready for the exam. So hopefully this has been something that you've been able to do as well. If you have questions about any of these that you've just gone through, you have questions about the exam, you have questions about the process, or you just have questions in general, stick around. I'm going to open up the phone lines. I'm going to take questions from the chat room. You can ask me about anything. It doesn't have to be about Network Plus. It can be about anything. It could be about the hours of time I wasted on the Xbox last night playing Division 2. It could be about what the weather's like. It could be anything. You're welcome to do that. I'm more than happy. I'll tell you all about how to call in just a moment. In the meantime, of course, you can go in and follow me on Twitter, get that weekly Network Plus pop quiz question of the week. Again, redundant. ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. YouTube's a good place to see all the videos coming out, and the Network Plus playlists are out there at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about my course notes. I think I've got it now so that ProfessorMesser.com/NPCN will go there, but you can always go to ProfessorMesser.com, choose Network Plus at the top of the page, and choose the course notes if you're interested in those as well. And thank you for those of you that have purchased the course notes. I'm extremely appreciative. It keeps all the lights on around here. So you're a huge part of what we are doing here at Messer Studios. Thank you for your ongoing support. We got one of these study groups. Check in the calendar. If you missed the live event, we'd love to have you here. Check to see when the next one's going to be at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. And I have a time zone conversion there because I'm incapable of counting time zones. So I put it there for me so that people who are like me would be able to do that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your comments in the chat room. We would not be able to do this without you. We've got another one of these coming next month. We'd love to have you on that one as well. Thanks for being here. Stick around for the next hour. We'll do some Q&A. Until then, I will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Let's see what I can get going here. I've got to bring up the phone lines. In the chat room, people are asking, what software did I use to create the booklet/PDFs? The software I used was Adobe InDesign, which is a desktop publishing front end. So Adobe InDesign. I use a lot of Adobe when creating my content. I use Adobe Premiere Pro for doing the video editing. I use InDesign for doing the course notes. I use their PDF readers and editors for customizing, putting the title page in the PDF and doing those types of things. So that's where that came from. Let's get the any work on the ICND2. Well, I wouldn't say any work. I want to create some ICND2 course notes. I have just not done it. It's on my list. There's a lot of things on my list. I'm afraid, but it is on my list. I do want to do that. Let's get a show started, though. I need to get my Skype running here. One of these days, somebody's going to call me on that, on the Skype. It's sort of an inside joke going back quite a ways. So let's see if I can get this show going. I need to call into the show, and then I'll tell you how to call into the show. Shouldn't be that long for me to set this up. We'll push some buttons. And then I'll put in a PIN number to have the show work. And it says, welcome. See, now I'm in the show, and you can be in the show too. In the continental United States, you can call in toll-free, 855-785-RJ45. That number again, 855-785-7545. West of the Rockies, it's all the same. If you are outside the continental U.S., one of the advantages of using Skype is Skype allows you to call a toll-free number for no Skype minutes. It doesn't cost you anything. I will pay for the call. Put a +1 at the beginning, +1, 855-785-7545, and you can call in with all of these to ask those questions. So feel free to do so. I'll also be taking questions from the chat room. You're welcome to put anything in there. I've been reading it. It's the live event chat. It's the event chat that it's the bottom of professormesser.com/live, or you can connect it directly there. So a question in the chat room quickly from Ken, then we'll go we won't go to the phone lines. He dropped off. For those of you doing this, maybe you just put in the chat room, which is fine too. We can sit here and talk about this. Will I ever consider doing a Linux Plus study group? I would love to do a Linux Plus study group. I would love to do a Linux Plus course. For some reason, I'm warming on that lately. CompTIA, of course, is releasing a new version of Linux Plus in short time, in a number of months. But I don't have any current plans, but I use Linux a lot. If you're on professormesser.com right now, you're on a Linux server running those web services. My database server's on Linux. My load balancers are on Linux. Technically speaking, the mixer that I use here to my left, this mixer runs on Linux. It's all IP-based. Once it comes out of the audio, it gets packetized. And so it's all IP-based inside of this mixer, which is just crazy. So I love running the Linux. I'm not sure. I've tried Linux courses in the past. It was not I was not ready for it, I don't think. And others were not ready for it. I know that for sure because they told me. I liked doing them though. And I've been using both Unix and Linux from back in the 80s. So it's right there in my wheelhouse. It's really more about timing. There's a lot of content I want to create once I finish the A+ course that we're working on right now. I'm updating the A+ course. When that's done, I want to do a lot of good Q&A. So I'd love to give you a Q&A for Network Plus that would be a sample exam that would really feel like the actual exam. So we have plans to do those types of things. There's no time frame. It's whenever I get to it. So that's going to be the next step. Next question from many of you, which is, when can I get that? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. There's no formal production schedule around here. It's as fast as I can make it. So as fast as I can get it to you, I will get it to you. But we're talking about months from now. We're talking about in my world of things that I would like to do, in my dream world, in my big list. They tell me that the sign of someone who's really working on something interesting is they have more things on their list that they would ever be able to get to. And I guess I fit into that category in making those things happen. Let's go to the phone lines. Let me make sure everything's working here. Go to the phone lines, the 614 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
Hello, Professor. My name is Stanley, and I'm calling from Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, Ohio. Welcome. What can we do for you?
I have an API question, an API-related question. API before. I was sitting at work and just playing around my network, and I typed API config/all just to see the API configuration of the network.
Sure.
And I saw a 172 172.170.254 for the gateway, and the IP address is 172.24.170.96 for the address.
Okay.
And I thought this was a class B address, but when I look at the subnet, it read 255.255.255.0.
Right.
And I thought, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely hear you. So I'm with you. I understand exactly what you're saying. Continue.
Yeah, and I was kind of confused. I thought that this mask is absolutely for a class C.
Right. So what's up with that? Why did that? That's not what we were expecting at all with that particular IP address. In fact,
that's not what I expected, of course.
In fact, I showed you at the very beginning of this study group, we did that performance-based question where we went through Class A, Class B, and Class C, and we looked at all of those to figure out what the classes would be, and then I showed you the default subnet masks for all of those classes. And they all, if you find a 172, it's a Class B, and what's the deal with that kind of scenario? So the question that first, let's have a look at that IP address that you found. It was a 172 dot. What was it? 24 or something?
That's 170.96.
So the 172.16 through 172.31 is an internal, a private IP address. That's the type of IP address we would certainly expect to see on somebody's network. There are, of course, in networking world, we have a number of different IP addresses that we could choose to be private IP addresses. There's a range. Anything starting with a 10 dot address is a private IP address. Anything starting with 192.168 is a private IP address. And anything in the range of 172.16 through 172.31 is a private IP address. And you will notice in all of those the default subnet mask for those and how they are used. For instance, a 172.16.0.0/12 is the default cider block subnet mask, which, by the way, doesn't correspond in any way to Class A, Class B, or Class C. And that is the one thing that I try to mention in my videos is that we no longer do class-based subnetting anymore. There was a time back in the day when there were a few devices in the world connecting over IP that we decided the subnet mask for your device is going to depend on what your IP address is. And we'll put these things into classes. So if your IP address starts with a 10, your subnet mask is going to be 255.0.0.0. And that's it. There was no choice for subnet mask. There was no option. You couldn't customize it. You couldn't make it smaller or larger. Well, imagine a subnet mask with just 255.0.0.0. There's millions of addresses that could be in that subnet, in that range of IP addresses. Incredibly wasteful from a subnetting perspective. And as their networks became more popular, as the technology got easier to implement, we started creating more and more networks, more and more subnets. And this idea of having class-based networking, this was horrible. We were wasting tons of IP addresses. So what we decided to do was say, all right, everybody, no more class-based subnetting. We are now going to do classless subnetting. You can now take what the default is and add on more bits to that subnet mask if you would like. And that's why we still tell you what the class is. The 172.16, you could technically think of a Class B with 255.255.0.0 as the subnet mask. But because we do classless, we could add on as many bits as we would like. If we wanted to make it 255.255.255.0, like your workstation happens to be, perfectly legitimate, perfectly reasonable, and something you're absolutely able to do in this world that we live in of classless subnetting. We only use the terms what the class of an IP address these days to determine where we should start with our subnetting process. And that's really the only use it has. Nobody looks at a device anymore and tries to figure out the subnet mask based on what the IP address happens to be. We also, by the way, colloquially use these in talking to other people. They'll say, hey, what subnet mask is on your workstation? And they'll go, oh, it's a Class C. But we aren't really saying it's a Class C. We're really saying it's 255.255.255.0. We've almost changed the definition of what a class is in common terms But that's why you're seeing subnet masks that don't seem to match what the class is, because these days we don't match them at all.
Okay. So, one thing I noticed is that with the VLSM that you just mentioned, the variable length subnetting, the last octet of the subnet map is something like 128, 192, 224, and so
Sure.
forth. But if you see the last octet is a 255, that I don't know if it kind of confuses me, because I thought when we do this variable length subnetting, the last octet of the subnet map is supposed to be anything other than 255.
Yeah, you've probably seen this in a routing table that's showing that. In fact, let me see if I can bring up my routing table, and we might be able to even have a look at this. I'm on a Mac, so I need to do a netstat-r on mine to be able to look at the routing table. How annoying is that? And you'll find in the routing tables especially is where you see this. So for the people that are listening, you're seeing a subnet mask of effectively a /32, which is effectively a subnet mask of 255.255.255.255. And it can throw you if you've never seen this before. Here's my routing table. So I have some TID.networks. I have 169.networks. I've got other things on here. But you can see there are addresses on here. If you need to get to the network of 10.1.10.1/32, you go to link number 8 on my machine. It's actually a locally connected IP address. So whenever you see /32, it's referring to or referencing a device, this single machine. So and you'll most commonly see this in routing tables where it's defining the route to the local IP address. Because a routing table, if you're trying to get to the local machine, you're not going somewhere else. It's almost like saying you are here. You're looking at a map, and the map has that big arrow pointing to you and saying, you are here. You don't need to go anywhere else. That's what the routing table is telling you. Oh, 10.1.10.1/32. Oh, /32, you are here. I'm really referring to that one device. Technically, you're not really subnetting at that point. You're really just saying it's that one machine we're referring to.
Okay. That helps.
These are extremely common questions I get about subnetting. People send me notes all the time about my video where I show an address of 10.1.2.3, and I show a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and they're saying, hold on, that's a Class A address, and you stuck a Class C subnet. Yep, that's the way we do it these days. It can be anything we want it to be. And once you figure out you have the flexibility, you realize how powerful that is with IP subnetting, and it becomes extremely useful. The problem now, of course, is now you have to learn IP subnetting. So that'll be the next thing you get to go through.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Just before you go, thank you so much for the video. I really appreciate it. It's very helpful. And especially that simplification of the EU-R64. That's amazing. I've really been struggling with that, how the IPv6 network generate the EU-R64, but the way you simplify the method is amazing. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, sir. I appreciate the call. Best of luck.
All right, thank you.
That is a nice little trick. If you've ever had to manage like a Cisco switch, a Cisco router, where it's already defining the IPv6 address, that's what he was referring to at the end, was converting the MAC address into an IPv6 address, which is effectively what they do inside of their components. And there's a quick trick in my videos that allows you to flip the bit. Do a quick little chart, and now you can flip the bit very easily and figure this out. I think we did it on last month's study group, maybe the month before. You have to look through some of those and see all those pieces. There's plenty to look at there. There is a lot going on here as well. We've got, there's my piece there. Let's see if I can get the other phone up. There it is. There's the phone lines. I knew we'd find it around here somewhere. So chat rooms, folks even starting to talk about What do I do with subnets? And they're going back and forth over subnets and the masks associated with these. So that would be a good way to do it. In fact, those are good things to do. Folks in the chat room are saying, here is a decimal subnet mask. How do I get the cider block notation from that? Those are good things to start understanding how to do. There's some of these in my mind. I get confused during the exam, which is why I write out everything on that sheet of paper they give you. Because it's hard for me to remember these on the fly during an exam. And by the way, for those of you wondering, I mentioned earlier about the professionals all the time are troubleshooting and forgetting to plug things in. Professionals all the time are always messing up subnetting. It's just hard to do. And it's very easy to make a mistake. There's too many numbers involved. So it's very common. People who have been in the industry, we've grown up on IP, we're very familiar with the process. It's not like we don't know how to do this, but we'll give somebody an IP address, a subnet mask, and then a default gateway that's not even in the same subnet. You have to say, you gave me, these don't match. These all have to, the IP address of the device and the IP address of the default gateway have to be in the same subnet. Oh yeah, okay, got it, sorry. That should be a 7. We fix all of that. Happens all the time. So for those of you trying to struggle through subnetting, you're trying to figure out, why is this not working? Why am I struggling with this? You're struggling with it because it's hard, and we struggle with it every day in the industry. Fortunately, when you start working with one particular mask, obviously the ones that end in a /8, a /16, and a /24 are pretty easy. So I really recommend, if you're building out a network, the /24 is for you. That's the one you want to use. Don't be like me and do a /26. It seemed like a good idea at the time. But now I can really subnet a /26. I got it cold. Maybe there's some benefits there. So I get to take that one back with me when doing those. But you never know what you're going to find. But don't be concerned about the subnetting piece and how this isn't quite looking right. It is hard, and we get it wrong all the time. So don't worry too much about that. One of the questions in the chat room is, what is the first CompTIA cert I would recommend a starter to begin with? I guess it kind of depends on what you mean by starter. Obviously, in the industry, we consider the A+ certification to be that entry-level cert into IT. It is the first thing that people go to really learn the ins and outs of mobile devices, computers, operating systems. You learn the basics of Windows. You can do some troubleshooting. There's some networking. There's some security. It's a broad overview, but you do learn quite a few very good skills that you could use to get your first IT job. If you work in the United States Department of Defense, they want your first certification to be at the level of a Security Plus. So there are a number of people that will come to my site and they'll study for their Security Plus. They don't have an A+. They don't have a Network Plus. They have no experience, no practical experience in information technology. They've never had a job in IT. They may have done technology things on their own, but they have no formal training or job experience in IT, but they're getting Security Plus so that they can work for a federal contractor or work for the Department of Defense directly, which is perfectly reasonable, by the way, because very little of Security Plus is overlapping with Network Plus. There's a little bit there. If you did a Venn diagram, there would be a little bit of overlap. Some people think it's half and half. It's not. There's just a little bit of overlap there. But Security Plus is so focused on process, procedure, technology. In fact, there's no command line that you need to know for Security Plus, but there's plenty of command line for A+, plenty of command line for Network Plus. So there are very different exams. So the question I have whenever somebody says, what should I do? What should my next certification be? What should my first certification be? My answer is going to be a question back to you, which is, what are you trying to do? What do you want to do? What are you trying to focus on? What's your goal? Are you trying to get a job in a local organization at a help desk so you can then move up? Are you trying to work for the federal government, Department of Defense? So it's going to depend on what your next thing is going to be. And people will go through their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus exams, and then say, what do I do next? I don't know. What do you want to do next? That's the beauty of technology, of course, and the beauty of IT. One of the huge reasons I do what I do is you could just decide what you want to do. What do you like to do? Do you like databases? Do you like web servers? Do you like networks? Do you like security? And even within each of those, there are niches and nuances. So if you go into networking, are you going to be an expert in switching? Are you going to be an expert in routing? Are you going to be an expert in wide area networks? If you go into security, are you going to be focusing on firewalls? Are you going to be focusing on anti-malware? Will you be focusing on SIMs? There's all kinds of different niches that you could go there. So it just depends on what you're interested in. What's nice about that, by the way, is employers want to hire people who are doing all these things. There are jobs where people will pay you money to focus on one of those things and make it happen. I was very successful in my career working for the manufacturers of these products. So I worked for Network General, and I was the systems engineer that knew everything you needed to know about the sniffer. I worked for Network Associates, so I learned everything you need to know about McAfee antivirus and the Gauntlet firewall at that time, and help desk software. We did tons of different things. So you had to be the expert in all of those products. I worked for Palo Alto Networks, where I had to be an expert in the firewall and the next generation firewall and everything that it does. So all of those steps along the way, you just figure out what you want to do, and there will be a job out there for that thing. Now, in my case, it involved me doing a lot of traveling. Maybe you don't want to travel. Perfectly reasonable. So find the job in your area that has the thing that you would like to do. Sometimes you don't even know what that thing is, by the way. You know, there was no next generation firewall when I got my first job in IT. So I could never imagine that I would be working for a company that made a next generation firewall. Didn't exist. The concept didn't exist. Even when we had the product, people didn't believe the product existed. That's how far ahead of the curve that particular product was. So those types of things happen all the time. Certainly, there was no concept that there would be a live streaming infrastructure worldwide that I would be able to click on a computer and suddenly be able to broadcast myself wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted. That's a little crazy. That's who would have thunk? And here we are. So you never know. Just figure out what you want to do, and you'll be able to do it. Let's go to the phone calls. 856, thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Mester. This is Gene from Jersey. How are you?
Hey, Gene, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Sure. I got a question. I'm studying the 900 series on the A+.
Yep.
And let me see. I'm having a... Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yep, we hear you just fine.
Oh, okay, great. I'm studying for the 900 series, the A+ series.
Yep.
As I'm going over your course notes and I study the quizzes at the end, I'm wondering, do you have a section, say, for example, pertaining to the hardware? Do you have quizzes categorized all by domains, or do you just have the 901 series and then it's broken down by all the quizzes that's in the 901 that you have set up?
Oh, this is a good question, because this is the challenges I have when I'm putting together my Q&A products is how do people want to digest this information? I think about how do I want to digest it, and how I want to use this content is in some cases different than how other people might want to use this content. If you look through, and I have samples available for you to download from the product information page. If you were to download my pop quiz collection book, I separated those questions out by the different domains. So for the 901, you've got hardware, mobile devices, networking, troubleshooting. So there's 4 different domains. I may have missed one in there, but you get the idea. Is all of the Q&A in that section, and there might be 200 or 300 questions in that section, all focus on that domain. And I tell you after every question what specific domain number it's about. So if you answer a first question on RAID, it will tell you, well, this comes from section 1.3 on RAID technologies, and I even give you a link back to the video that you could watch if you were trying to figure out where that answer came from. But I break them out that way. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but that's the way I did it for now. I think some people have said I would rather have a sample exam that best emulates the 90 questions that I would get on an actual exam. So I would create multiples of those. So it just depends on what people are looking for. Right now, the 901 pop quiz collections are focused and broken out and organized by domain. So that might help you for the things you're looking for. Of course, you're on a tight time frame. You got to get these done by July 31st, of course, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm giving myself 2 more weeks because I've been really ill. If I have it together by 2 weeks, then I'll go ahead and take it, and then I'll take the 902 hopefully sometime in June.
Yeah, you got a pretty good ramp there.
If that doesn't happen, I'll just switch over. Yeah, because I've been studying, so I have a good grasp of the information.
Yeah, you're going to do fine. You're time frame wise, you're in fine shape. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Great, and I want to thank you, man. I really appreciate what you're doing. I've been really sick, and sometimes it's hard for me to pay attention and sit up to the videos. But you give me the option. I'm trying to keep it together because you're a blessing to me. You give me an option to just listen to the podcast as I'm going through my illness and studying. And man, you don't know how much you mean to me and my family. You blessed me tremendously already. I had a job. They held it for me long as they could before I got sick, but they giving me another chance to come back once I'm released from the doctor's care. But man, you have no idea what you mean to me, Professor Messer. And just keep it up. And thank you so much for all you do, man. I thank you so much.
We're glad you're feeling better, Gene. We're looking forward to hearing when you get your A+. I'd love to have you call back in once that happens and hear the rest of that story.
I'll definitely give you feedback. Thank you again, man.
Appreciate you, sir.
Bye-bye. Sure.
That's some dedication. Good for you, sir. That is sticking with it. I always worry that, am I having a bad day? Are there things I should be concerned about? And then there are people doing the heavy lifting. Nice story. Keep that focus. What you're doing is exactly what you should be doing. And I said this, I think last week, I think it's worth saying again, is that technology is the great equalizer. It is the thing that can be financially the thing that can help your family. It's out there. It's just waiting for you. You just have to take it. Life sometimes throws weird stuff at you all the time. But just keep doing what you're doing. And I promise you, there's plenty of opportunity there at the end of this. So that was, I look forward to hearing the end of that one. Let's go to the 909. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Olin. I'm calling from Ontario, California.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
Yeah, so I'm scheduled to take the N10-007 here in about a week.
Okay.
And, so I use a lot of content, a lot of study stuff. I use some Mike Myers stuff, but more recently, mostly your stuff, just it's more concentrated. Well, my question is what, like leading up here this week coming up, there's a lot of memorization stuff I really want to lock down. Like, what should I be looking at right now?
One of the things that this came up actually in my chat room earlier in the week, so this is a very timely question, which is somebody was very focused on the abbreviations and the names that go with those abbreviations. So they really were trying to lock down. NAS means network address storage. SAN means storage address. Well, as it turns out, and as you could tell by the question I asked there at the end of the study group, turns out it doesn't matter what those mean. Turns out the important part is, what are they used for? What good is that technology? How is that technology really applied on the network? So a lot of people focus a lot of time on DHCP, stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. It doesn't matter what it stands for. In fact, we rarely call it that. All we're saying is the DHCP server down because people are not able to get their IP addresses automatically. That's the important key, is don't worry so much, of course, that they may throw something at you that uses the term and doesn't use the abbreviation, but they usually don't. But they are throwing things at you in the question that automatically assume that you know how that's used. Somebody says, the DHCP server's down. What is the next thing you should do? And they give you a list of things. Or the DHCP server's down. How did this person know that that happened? And you have to know, well, if the DHCP server's down, people not getting an IP address automatically. If people aren't getting an IP address automatically, they're probably getting an API-IPA address. And if they're getting an API-IPA address, here's the address they're probably getting. And that will be somewhere in the answer is they have an IP address of, and then they will list out an API-IPA address there. But unless you're able to make the link between DHCP to automatic IP addressing, you would have never figured out the IP address they stuck in to the answer. That's the real link between these, is not even knowing that API-IPA means automatic IP addressing, that DHCP means dynamic host configuration protocol. It's knowing how is that really used on the network. And if you go back through the list, since you're taking this soon, I'll give you my normal, you're taking your test in a week, what should you do piece of information, which is you go back to the exam objectives. That is your checklist. So go through that checklist, start going through all of the objectives. Don't spend a lot of time in the glossary, which is really what that last 5 minutes of my rant was about. Spend the time in the main part of those domains, understanding what these things do. If you can, if you have somebody to talk to, or you just like to talk to yourself, try explaining what that particular technology is to someone else. That will help you understand, do you know what this technology does? And that way you can check that one off the list and go to the next one, or circle it and say, I need to do a little bit more time. I feel uncomfortable trying to describe to somebody what API-IPA is. That would be a good last week of time to go through to help with the studies.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I definitely do some talking to myself in the car, so I think that'll help.
I talk to myself all the time, so that's might as well. There's nobody in here but me.
So it looks like I'm talking to someone else.
I probably have videos of me during me shooting videos where I'm asking questions. I'm waiting for an answer. There's not an answer. I'm the only one here.
Perfect, man. Thank you so much for that semester. It's been awesome watching all your content, and all the help's been extremely helpful.
I appreciate the call, sir.
All right.
That's one of the things that probably one of the best tips that I got was explaining it. I think that's one of the things that helped me so much when I was making these videos, that making the video prepared me for the actual exam. I used to take every one of these exams, and I've mentioned earlier in other study groups, I don't take the exams anymore because if I take the exam, I have to sign the candidate agreement that says I can't talk about about the exam experience. But I like telling you about the exam experience. But if I don't take the exam, I can hear about the exam experience, and technically I'm not violating the candidate agreement. Although technically if CompTIA came to me and said, stop talking about that stuff, I would probably do that. Or they would say, we're taking your certification away. Okay. I guess they'd have to do that too. I technically did break the candidate agreement. I would have to side with them on that one. So I don't take the exams anymore just so I can tell you about it. Hopefully you can appreciate that. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Like, why would I not want to take the exam? Because I want to tell you about the exam. And sometimes I do that. I try to stay close to the idea of what that candidate agreement is. I do not give away actual exam information. I don't give away anything that's not already known as very common knowledge, in my opinion. So I'm definitely not somebody, I'm not trying to give you a cheat because there are none. There's no shortcuts for these exams. If you know the content, you're a better technical person. If you spend your time trying to memorize the answers, that doesn't help you learn anything. And that's, I think, the one benefit from these certifications that often we overlook is we're using the certification to get a job. We're using the certification to go on a CV or resume. We're using the certification to get a better job in our organization. But we almost forget that by the time we went through all of the exam content, and we actually know something now, we actually learned something that we can use in our day-to-day. A good example of this is I was working for Network General, systems engineer. I knew everything there was to know about the sniffer, distributed sniffer product line, our reporting tools, really understood how these products are used to analyze and troubleshoot a network. And the questions that would come out of this were very focused on Microsoft. So, because almost everybody we connect to a network, there's tons of Microsoft on there. Well, Microsoft has really their own way of networking. SMB, the DNS at the time, the WINS functionality, very unique way of networking. And unless you really spent some time understanding it, it became difficult. So I thought, well, let me go get Microsoft certified. So I did. I went out on my own and got my Microsoft certification. I kept getting them. I eventually got my MCSE. That's what it was called at the time. So it's called that now. Now they're calling it MCSE again. At the time, it was the MCSE of NT40. So but taking that, I got an understanding of Active Directory, of WINS, of how DNS works in here, how the NetBIOS process works, how the direct communication with SMB over TCP 445. It really made me understand a lot more about the Microsoft world that I didn't have a knowledge of before. I was able to take that and immediately apply it back to everybody's networks I was plugging in, and suddenly was seeing information in the sniffer that I missed before because I didn't know what I was looking at. So we sometimes forget about that. We miss that there's actual things we're learning from this that will help us later on, or help us in ways we didn't even realize. And of course, all of this builds on each other. Sometimes we forget that too, that what you're learning today about IP addressing, subnet masking, now suddenly you're in a job, you have to manage a router. Oh, that's /32 in the routing table. I know that's the local address. Now you expand on that, you do more BGP, or you're doing OSPF, or you're implementing EIGRP in your environment. Oh, now we're doing IPsec to another location, a route-based IPsec. So all of these things you just learned, IP subnetting, dynamic routing, IP subnetting, routing, switching, dynamic routing, ultimately IPsec, route-based IPsec, all of that is now working together. And you were just simply the building blocks. You will get there. Will you know how to set up route-based IPsec today if you don't know how to do subnet masking? You probably won't. But nobody's expecting you to. It all builds on a building block. And the speed of that building is up to you. You can spend as little or as much time as you'd like. There is always something new to learn. Nobody will know everything. People will tell you they know everything. They do not know everything. They give the impression they know everything. They do not know everything, because it's impossible to know everything. But they may be very knowledgeable in a very particular segment. And if you're somebody who is really looking to get a technical job and you're really looking to excel in technology, once you kind of get the broad landscape, once you're at a point where you sort of have gone through your A+, your Network+, your Security+, you've now gone through maybe some Microsoft training, you've done some Cisco training, or whatever it happens to be, you're broadening the scope of what you know at a technical level. Now start drilling down. One of the best things you can do for yourself is to find that niche. Whatever that niche happens to be. That niche might be a piece of software. That niche might be a dynamic routing protocol. That niche might be a firewall. It could be many different things. And you learn everything there is to know about that thing. Learn everything there is to know about managing that switch. Learn everything there is to know about managing that firewall, about using that application, about deploying that application, about troubleshooting that application. Learn everything you could possibly know. Obviously, the idea is here, you're learning this in the scope of you're working for someone or doing some work where that knowledge is valuable. And what you'll find is the more you learn about this, the more you realize nobody's ever gone this deep with these products before. Nobody's ever spent that much time on that application. You now turn out to be the expert with that application, with deploying that application over a WAN, with the things that you've done. You become the expert in that firewall functionality, in using that switch in a particular way. Every different organization uses these things in different ways. The switch configuration in one organization might be a little different than the other. People use VLANs in different ways. People do IP addressing in different ways. So the way you do it and drill down into it may be very different. Question in the chat room. What do I think, a security question, what do I think about account lockout DOS attacks? What do I think about them? Well, it's a challenge. What is it possible to prevent this? Well, it is possible to prevent this. There's a number of things you can do. It's difficult to prevent this if you keep the same account, because we can't turn off the account lockout. That always has to be there. But we can, of course, make your accounts more secure to begin with by adding multiple forms of authentication. So multi-factor authentication, such as an app on your mobile device, maybe a physical dongle, maybe just a card that's used. There's a matrix that on a card where you can use for those types of things. Or even text messages, although every time I mention text message as multi-factor authentication, the security folks always yell at me because nobody really thinks that's a very secure way of doing multi-factor, and they're right, except we still do. So I mention it. We can fight about that afterwards. Trust me, I've got plenty of emails already written. I'll just copy and paste if you have a question about that. The things that are a challenge, if this happens to someone over and over and over again, then eventually you're going to have to change your login name. I mean, that's how you fix that. Make it so that the bad guys don't know the name, so they can't lock you out. So there's also other things you can do. On my site, I implement IP-based locking before someone is able to lock somebody's account. So if you get the username wrong a certain number of times, I go ahead and lock you out instead of locking the account. Now, if you showed back up on a different IP address and you tried to still keep doing that, you would eventually lock that account. But there are ways to mitigate it and work around it. So that's one of those things that it just depends on what the application is that what the authentication is that you're trying to prevent the DOS on, and what your options are for that particular technology. There's a lot of options for Windows. There's not a lot of options for an app that someone has written internally because it wasn't written with that in mind. Although maybe it's time to write something new in the app. Sometimes you can implement account lockouts on something like a web application firewall if it's a browser-based app. So you might have options for a browser-based app that doesn't have any type of DOS mitigation inside of it. You can move that DOS mitigation into a device in the front of that app, like a WAF, a web application firewall. There's other things you can do. The security market is rife. It is full of different options for doing those types of things. So it just depends on what you want to do to have all of those things there. So that's my very long and extended ideas and descriptions of what you should be doing in your IT career, but maybe that's something you can use. If you take a little bit of it, throw the rest out, I'm fine with that. That's what worked for me. You might have a completely different path with a completely different plan. As long as it works for you, that's fine with me too. So either way, works great. Well, this brings us to the end of the study group. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for being here for the Q&A. Thank you for your calls and your comments in the chat room and your questions coming in there. We would not be able to do this without you. And I'm so grateful for your participation. We'd love to have you here next week. Check back in on Wednesday. We have our Security Plus study group a week from today, where we just do the same thing but with Security Plus, which is also a lot of fun. So we'd love to have you back here as well. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone.